Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Graceologie with Gwen Smith podcast. I'm Gwen Smith, and I'm so glad you joined me today. Around here, we have fun, faith-focused, grace-filled conversations, all to help you know and trust God more. Our discussions are honest, often humorous, and always practical. And they're going to encourage you in meaningful ways to live out and lean on the grace of Jesus in the midst of cluttered, messy days. You got any of those? I know I do. And I can't wait to get to today's conversation, which is all about owning your everyday. Does it ever feel like you still have to find your purpose, or that you're stuck with unfigured out dreams? Do you feel the pressure to prove, or do you worry about what other people are going to think? If so, let me assure you, you are not alone. I've personally wrestled with a lot of this, and so has my guest. She's wrestled with those very issues, and she opens up today about some of the ways that God has been teaching her to chase His purposes while also finding contentment right where she is. Joining me today is millennial phenom, Instagram powerhouse, and national best-selling author Jordan Lee Dooley. She is so much fun, guys. You're going to love her. We have a fascinating conversation about the message of her book, Own Your Everyday. And Jordan shares some powerful ways that you can overcome the pressure to prove and show up for what you were made for. This episode will also help you tackle some of those obstacles that can trip you up, like disappointment, perfectionism, comparison, and distraction. And you'll be challenged to remove a few labels and break out of that box of expectations. So if you're ready to have some fun and do some heart work, you're going to love today's conversation with Jordan Lee Dooley. Well, hello, Jordan. I'm super excited to have you on the Graceologie show today. Welcome.
Oh, thank you. It's really fun to be here.
Well, one of the things we do around here to get to know our guests on a personal kind of girlfriendy levels, we have a fast, fun favorites round. So we're going to start off with that. Are you ready?
Okay. Oh, I'm ready.
Okay, Jordan, beach or mountain?
Ooh, I would say mountain.
Okay. What emoji do you use the most?
The lightning symbol, because we need more electricity and energy.
Perfect. Mascara or foundation?
I'd say foundation, just because I've still got some scarring.
Yeah. I'm with that. Okay, on a scale of 1 to 10, how good are you at ping pong?
You know, I grew up playing ping pong, so I wouldn't say I'm professional, but I could probably kick some ping pong butt.
Okay, so what's your number, scale 1 to 10?
Ooh, I'd probably give it a 7, maybe a 6. It depends on who we're comparing to, but probably a 6 or a 7. We had a ping pong table in my basement, and that would be what we did on the weekends when my brother and I were young.
I didn't even know that. Very impressive. Speaking of growing up, what was your nickname growing up?
So this is hilarious, and maybe this is why I like the lightning bolt symbol or emoji. When I was growing up, I begged my parents to change my name to Sparkles because everybody wants a sparkle. And so they said no. And so I said, well, could it be my middle name? And I didn't understand legally changing a name. They said no. I'm kind of grateful for that now. But for years, I went by Sparkles. And if someone was talking to me and they called me by my real name, I would say, I'm sorry, who? And they had to call me Sparkles. So I took it very seriously.
That's so fabulous. Okay. That just makes me smile. Okay. Next question. Favorite store to shop for clothes?
I have a couple favorites, but I have really loved stores like Madewell. That's more of a national brand. And I also have a friend who has a store called Carly Jean Los Angeles. And I just love their stuff. So she's a little bit more of a, online brand. And then Madewell, I love shopping their stuff. Very similar styles.
Got it. Okay. Spontaneity or stability?
I'm kind of right in the middle. It really depends. My husband is the spontaneous one, and I'm more of the stability planner, but we kind of have now balanced each other out so much that I kind of need a little bit of both.
Fair enough. Okay. What NFL team do you root for?
Okay. This is a sore subject. So my husband actually played in the NFL, and he played for the Steelers for a little while. So for a short bit, I was a massive Steelers fan, but then they released him. So now I'm not really sure how I feel about it. Like, I'm just kind of like indifferent towards the NFL, because I'm like, it's kind of weird once you've been on like the inside. You're like, I don't really have a favorite now. I cheer for IU football, which is our college team.
Well,
but man, NFL is kind of a tough subject.
Okay, I see, and I live in Charlotte, North Carolina now, but I'm from Pittsburgh originally, so I'm Steelers black and gold.
Okay, well, my husband was with them for a while, and we had a great experience. I mean, nothing against Steelers, we love them, but I mean, it's just kind of one of those things where it's like, do you root for them now, or what do you do? You know, but my dad was a Steelers fan growing up, so.
Oh, I love your dad. That's so awesome. No, see, I thought I was going to hear Colts. So since you're in Indiana, but
I guess that's kind of the default. Like, if I had to default cheer for a team because they're right down the road. Yeah, exactly. I'm like, but if they're losing, like, maybe not.
I hear you. Okay, so how tall are you?
I am 5'4". I actually stopped growing when I was like 13 years old. So I've been this size for the majority of my life. I was like super tall as a kid, and now I'm just normal. So
I get it. Okay. What's your guilty pleasure?
I don't know. Okay. So we've been watching crime shows a lot. So maybe that's kind of like the guilty pleasure, which we're not big TV people. So it's kind of weird, but we've been watching just different crime shows like Bosch and things like that. So I'd say in this season, definitely that.
Okay. How long can you hold a plank?
Probably a minute and a half.
Yeah.
Not that long, but longer than 30 seconds. I know that for sure.
Very good. What's your favorite scent of a car freshener?
I love like clean smells, like fresh laundry or something like that.
Yes, same. And then the final question in the Fast Fun Favorites round is Larry Bird or Larry the Cucumber?
Larry the Cucumber, obviously. That's hilarious.
Well, being from Indiana, I just didn't know if you were going to have to go with Larry Bird. But...
No, well, I mean, I don't have anything against it, but I would say I just think that's funny. I grew up watching VeggieTales. I have more of a commitment to Larry the Cucumber.
He is absolutely one of the most adorable characters of all times, right?
I know, seriously. Him and Bob.
I know, Bob the tomato. So awesome. Love it. Well, that was fun. I feel like we just, kicked back and had a cup of coffee, laughed a little. Oh, good. Yay. Hey guys, I just want to say a quick thank you to all of you in the Graceologie community who have rated this show on iTunes or who have written a short review. It makes such a big difference. So if you happen to be listening and you've not yet done it, I would really appreciate it if you would. Would you click your podcast app or go visit iTunes and give us a 5-star rating or just a quick 1-sentence review? From my heart, it would really mean a lot. For the sake of my Graceologie community, would you just go ahead and tell us a little bit more about who you are and what God has you doing right now?
Absolutely. So, man, I have kind of made up a little bit of a job title for myself because I feel like I was telling you off air, I feel like I'm kind of like a unicorn. Like, I don't really fit in one specific area. And like, I love doing entrepreneurship stuff for women. And I also love speaking to, other Christian women. And there's just so many things I've done. And so I've really, started to coin this term. I call myself a multi-passionate authorpreneur because I'm an author, but I also am very I always love just finding different side hustles or little business adventures and I think that was really ingrained in me growing up. Like, I grew up in a family of entrepreneurs and also believers. So I really learned what business with character looks like and creating opportunities for people looks like. Like, that was a really big thing. I always felt like my parents were always in business because they really believed in helping create opportunities for other people too, like not only for our family, but also for others. And there was multiple different experiences I had with seeing that happen. And so I think that really kind of has been in my blood. And so as I've just built a brand online, I've really coined this term because I'm like, well, I'm an author, but I also am kind of have this entrepreneurial spirit. And I'm also very multi-passionate. And there's different pieces where some things are, part of the career and some of them are just passions I talk about. And so all that to say, I recently wrote a book called Own Your Everyday. And I'm just, one of those people who are like, I have a podcast and I speak and I have a book and there's multiple things going on. But I really love speaking very specifically to women who find themselves in transitional periods of life because I felt like a lot of the messaging that was out there was like this, whether it was find your purpose or go after your dreams or, don't stop till you get to the top, get your dream job. And I'm here for it in so many ways. But I started to feel like, well, what about the woman or the girl who's maybe coming out of grad school or a first time mom or a first time empty nester, or in those seasons where it's like, okay, my life just changed drastically, or I just moved across the country, or all my friends are getting married, or whatever it is. And I don't even really know what my dream would be. Like, super empowering, but I'm just trying to stay afloat.
Yeah.
I don't know what my next step is. I felt like so many women in my audience are asking me, and many of them were already very successful in their career or their business or whatever, or their, med school or whatever they were doing. And still this question of like, how do I figure out my purpose? How do I find my thing? Seemed to just come through. And I think a lot of it was because they were watching me do these multiple different things, like as I was finding my thing, right? And I think we believe this lie that we have to have one thing forever and always. And to some degree, I think focus is strong. Your focus is wise. And there is a point where you can't do everything at one time. But I've really kind of tried to be a slightly different voice in the space of like building your career, going after your dreams, doing the things that we all hear that we need to do, but in a way that I think almost celebrates being somewhat multi-passionate in a way that helps someone navigate through what I call unfigured out dreams, because that's a real thing and nobody's talking about it. Yeah. So, that's kind of the heart behind what I do. And that's taken a couple different, routes from speaking to podcasting to a program I'm building out. But I think we can really get caught up in that pressure to prove. And so it's like, how do we actually operate from a place of purpose and really strong intention rather than the pressure to prove ourselves, because then we'll start running ourselves dry. So anyways, that's a little bit about what I do and the heart behind what I do.
I love it. Well, it's like, girl, you are a diamond. There are lots of different cuts, all shining, reflecting the light well. And that's what I love. And I appreciate that about you. I was thinking before, when I was, reading through your book and preparing for our conversation, some ways I would describe you, because I do follow you on Instagram now. And I've been looking at just your messaging and the way you're speaking into the lives of women. And that's why I was really excited to have you on the show. Some of the description words that I wrote down that I've seen in you is you're relatable, you're, first of all, adorable.
Thank you.
You're honest and you're sincere and you're vulnerable. And everything in your messaging is encouraging and empowering. And so that's why I am very excited to wave my pom-poms as a fellow sister in Christ and a fellow woman with a million facets. I'm the same way. I mean, I'm a speaker, an author, and I do the same thing. So it's like, I get you. And there are people who my life makes them dizzy just thinking about it. But I know that would be the same with you.
I'm like, judge me, okay?
Exactly. But God wires us all so differently.
Totally.
And totally. So I get you, girl. I get you. But I did want to talk about your book, Own Your Everyday. I'm excited to introduce it to my Graceologie community. And what's a little different, is that it's not like a how-to faith book. It's not a Bible study or even a Christian living book. It is like a life coaching book. It's so inspirational. It's motivational, but you speak and you write with the voice of a girlfriend who is a mentor and as a woman who loves Jesus. And you bring the scripture and you bring the Lord into the conversation in a way that is not done much at all in the space that you operate, in that personal development space. And I'm so proud of you, first and foremost. I want to say high fives, girlfriend.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, no, I do. I praise God for that. And so I am excited because your book is in that category of personal development, of self-help, of mentoring, but it's so full of depth and really just, I love that you take biblical truths, you break them down, you do share, you expose these weaknesses in your life to really emphasize the power of Christ at work within you. And you speak life and purpose to hearts. And so that's absolutely. So I just would love to know about, how did you come to know Jesus? You said you were raised in a Christian home, but how did your relationship with Christ? I mean, so not only tell us your story, how did you come to know the Lord personally, but then how has your relationship with Christ influenced your platform and in the business world and these choices that you're making with your online presence?
Yeah, such a good question. So to the first question, I mean, I really grew in a very personal way and really, I think, understood what the good news actually really was once I actually was away from it. I think sometimes we are like, when you're raised with something or you have this general understanding and it just is like it was boring to me, honestly. I'm just pretty straight up about like, I'm just not a very religious person in that like the box checking and the whatever just kind of bored me. I'm like way too, I don't know. I just feel like life, like God is so much more life than that. And so I went away to college. I went to a really big university, secular university, Indiana, which I loved. I am such a proud Hoosier. But that's a very different. I went to a private Catholic high school and grade school my entire life. So I went to religion classes literally every day. And then I, was in a very small environment and community that kind of all thought the same for the most part. And I'm grateful for that. But at the same time, I went away then to IU, Indiana, and that was 4.5 hours from home. And very different, 40,000 undergrads, not at all a Christian campus. And I kind of knew that. I was a little bit worried because I was always kind of like, I was the oldest child. So I think I kind of had like oldest child, good girl syndrome where I was like, I will follow every rule. I will do everything right. I'm the best believer there is, So, went away to college and I think I just kind of got wrapped up a little bit that first year. And like, I think I just kind of shed like this need to be the best. And there would be times like I was still called in college. Like I kind of got into the party culture and everything, but I was still the good girl because I wasn't doing drugs. Like that's hilarious. Right. But anyways, that was the standard, just to give you kind of context. And I use one of the biggest party schools in the country. And so I feel like God really protected me. I really do believe that there were a lot of things I think that could have gone much worse than they ever did. And I felt like I think I always had the Lord with me. And I think I still carry that, even though I was kind of away from knowing him personally in that regard. And so, and I always thought like knowing Jesus was like religion, like stand up, sit down, kneel, like go through all these processes. And so all that to say, then toward my sophomore year, I'd gotten into a relationship that year with a guy that was much older than me. And that relationship ended the summer after my freshman year. And he was kind of like, there was nothing necessarily bad about the relationship, but I think what made it hard for it to end was that he was, he had been in college for 3 years longer than I had. So he was kind of showing me the ropes. He'd pick me up from class because no freshman has a car, all those things. Yeah. So I felt like I kind of had a guide through and it was kind of like a safe feeling. And then he graduated and he started working and we broke up and I went into my next year of school and I started living in an apartment that year with some girls that I knew. And one of them ended up moving after that first semester. I just felt kind of isolated. I think I had gone through a really hard year where I had lost my grandmother. I wrote about that in the book that happened my freshman year. And I think I kind of numbed it a lot with the party culture, with, all the things, the achievements, I wrote about this, like the boyfriend, the academic achievements, the partying, like literally everything. Yeah. So by my sophomore year, I think I finally started actually mourning that and feeling it because I really couldn't run from it anymore. And he wasn't around to like distract me or, comfort me or whatever. So really I would say it kind of really started my sophomore year in that I became hungry for like knowing God again. I would go out on my little patio that I lived, in the apartment that I lived in, and I would start trying to read the Bible, but I had never actually really read the Bible growing up. I just like went to church and did religious stuff. Right. I mean, my parents read the Bible with us, but I wasn't interested because I thought that wasn't what I didn't think it was necessary. I thought that was like what the priest did. Right. So my mom would always like encourage us, read the Bible, like ask Jesus into your heart. And I was like, okay, Mom, you're a weirdo,
You're so extra, like, Mom.
Yeah. I was like, we got this, like I go to religion classes. I'm good. Yeah. So anyways, long story short, I started to explore more and I went to a couple like campus ministry meetings and it really touched me. And that's when I started to grow like a hunger for it, but I didn't really have good community in my faith. So then I, a little bit later, ended up meeting my now husband and we kind of started dating because I had a heart for the Lord, but he actually really had some strong Christian community. So I feel like I got connected with a Christian community because I met him, which was awesome because that was like the piece that I was missing. So then I really started to grow and desire it. And then I think what really sealed the deal was actually toward my senior year. Like, I think I was still really living kind of from this religious, I just wanted out of like the darkness that I felt like my life had become the first 2 years of college or the first year and a half of college. And so I, during that time, also had kind of struggled with really unhealthy dieting and extreme exercise and lost way too much weight. Became very obsessive about it. I think a lot because my life was kind of like, I went through a breakup. I lost my grandma. I didn't have really solid friends. Like, I didn't really know where I was. And I think it was just my means to feel like I had control of something. And so anyways, that was something I struggled with through the couple middle years of college. And by my senior year, it had gotten a lot better, but I had never really opened up about it. I never really asked for help with it. I always lived in denial of it. Like, my mom was so concerned, and she like sent me back to school with a scale and required that I send her pictures of my weight, because apparently she had gone to a doctor on my behalf. And they basically said, if she drops below this, you need to bring her in. Yeah. So I thought she was crazy. Again, I'm like, Mom, you're so extra. But anyways, she was really looking out for me. It ended up kind of just improving. I think because the healthier the community I got involved in, I just felt like I was less extreme with that kind of stuff. Mm-hmm. But it wasn't until my senior year where I talked about this in the book, but basically I just had a very personal encounter with the Lord through encountering. Basically, I feel like God put a woman in front of me that was like her external behavior and experience was very much a reflection of my internal heart posture and position towards God and the Lord and everything. And basically the short version of it is she had this really messy shirt on. She was hiding behind a door. It was someone I was delivering care packages to in an underprivileged community. And she wouldn't take the free gift from us. It was just free food for the holidays, Yeah. And she wouldn't open the door. She was like, no, I don't need that. I don't need that. And she closed the door. And it later really wrecked me because I realized, like, on the outside, I am this confident, happy, bubbly person. I'm a Christian. I'm crushing it. Like, that's how I kind of viewed my last 2 years of college as an upperclassman. And it was towards the end of my senior year that the Lord just showed me, like, yeah, you have all these doors of put togetherness up and you haven't fully opened the door to me still. And that was so like, what? So he basically just showed me the power of, like, opening up and allowing him to see every, like, stain and scar and mistake and struggle and insecurity and everything else, and actually taking the gift that he offers us and receiving it without this, like, it's not like, oh, there's strings attached, which I think that girl believed maybe when we were trying to give it to her. So I just saw so much of myself in her. It was so powerful for me. And so I think that's where it all really clicked. It was like a few years in the process of thinking I knew, and then really just allowing him fully to come into my life was a whole different thing. So that's kind of the long version of that story. But I think every piece has been, it wasn't like one day I woke up and there it was, it's like, it was kind of a 3-year process, I feel like. So,
well, everyone's journey to the freedom, which I did read that chapter. I'm so grateful, first of all, for your vulnerability even in this conversation with us getting started, but also in the book, because you're talking about, you can't be 99% when it comes to freedom. You have to be all in. And that's really, it's an important thing for us to understand, is God's not looking for us to check boxes with him. He's not looking for us to, do all the right things. And he wants our heart. He wants us to understand that true freedom comes in that full surrender to his way, and then to step into who he designed us to be. And you talk so much about purpose. So I'm grateful, but I know that even as you're sharing that, there's got to be listeners who are like, whoa, she just exposed me.
Well, good.
Yeah. Great. Because we got you, girl. Today's episode of the Graceologie with Gwen Smith podcast is sponsored by FabFitFun. Guys, I'm so excited to let you know that the 2019 FabFitFun Fall Box is now on sale. Use coupon code Graceologie to receive $10 off your first box at fabfitfun.com. FabFitFun is a women's lifestyle subscription box with full-size beauty, fitness, fashion, and lifestyle products sent straight to your doorstep each season. And you get to customize some of the items in your box according to your own personal style and interests. It retails for $49.99, but always has a value of over $200. And when you use code Graceologie, your first box is only $39. My fall box is off the chain, you guys. I'm so excited about it. I got a ceramic flat iron by Amika that normally retails for $80, a really stylish slim striped wallet from Cut From The Cloth, and a full-size jar of Cosmetics Pure C to brighten my skin, all in my fall box. These boxes do sell out fast, guys, so sign up for yours today. Head over to fabfitfun.com and use coupon code Graceologie for $10 off your first box. But so your online community and one of your tagline per se for years has been your brokenness is welcome here. So what do you mean by that?
Yeah. Well, I actually kind of started that a little bit as an accident. And I actually think to the question you're asking about, like, how does this story and like just your walk with the Lord influence what I do online and just what I do with my career? I have really learned I've always been someone who doesn't stay in a box. And also I've really been taught how important relationships are. And growing up, my dad, he ran a construction company, and he told me this thing. He calls it the 10-foot rule. And basically what the 10-foot rule is if someone's within 10 feet of you, you actually acknowledge their existence and say hi. Because I think we live in a culture that's very like head down, rather than eyes up. And so that's always been ingrained in me. And so I think that's kind of made me a very naturally like welcoming person. And my parents also, they didn't spend any, and if they ever had like a bonus or, growing up, any financial, I guess, like abundance that they had were either spent on experiences or serving people. So they would host these like annual gatherings, big annual bonfires. They started something like every year they had the 4th of July party and everybody came. And so I really got used to watching people be hosted by my family in kind of this like very hospitable, welcoming, non-judgmental way. And so we had all different types of people at my house all the time. My mom is actually of a Latin background. So we had, Latin American people in our house. We had my dad's Polish family in our house. We had all these different types of people. We took in foreign exchange students. Like it was just such a like melting pot in my own home and a place of hospitality. Yes. And so I think experiencing that growing up kind of made me a lot more understanding of what the kingdom kind of looks like. Yes. And I also, even just kind of piggybacking off of the story I wrote in the book, just to kind of make sure I get this thought out, was that I really learned that not everything has to be necessarily about the Bible specifically to be biblical. Yes. Meaning, I think we think like, oh, if it's not a Bible study book, it's not a Christian, it's not a book that's biblically sound. And I'm like, that's actually not true. Even just what you and I were talking about, it's like, it can be presented in multiple ways, but everything I do is rooted in what I believe is truth. Like that only makes sense, right? It doesn't mean I have to go, okay, and the 6 verses that back this up is this, because I'm not a pastor. Totally. But it's just like, hey, this is the principle of wisdom that I can give you, whether or not it's a study or not. I know it's rooted in truth, and so that kind of guides that in the whole hospitality thing. Those two, I guess, truths or principles really give me a lot of freedom in my work, and also make me want to have this welcoming brand, because I feel like my place on the internet is kind of like my house on the internet. And I hope that what I put there is a reflection of what you'd experience if you actually walked into my home. Obviously, there have to be some boundaries, because, like you don't want somebody, but like the reality is like the general experience that I hope someone would have is that they feel understood and welcomed and seen and loved. And so that's why when I first started my brand, it's funny because, again, not only informed by my childhood, but also my whole brand actually started as a hand lettering Etsy shop. I don't know how we went from hand lettering Etsy shop to what I do now. That's the whole multi-passionate, nonlinear journey coming to fruition. But, when I first started that, I was actually in my senior year, and I was living in a sorority house because I decided to live there as a senior. And I had a lot of sorority sisters kind of rally around me when I was packaging these little items that I was shipping out to wherever, and, doodling, and they were encouraging. And then they would come and sit in this creepy storage closet where I would package everything, and they would package it with me. They would help me till 2 a.m. when they should have been studying, and we get to talking about the breakup somebody went through, or the dream somebody had, or the insecurity somebody was experiencing, or, all of these just different things. And some of the gals like shared my beliefs and some of them didn't, but it was this kind of like, it was like your brokenness is welcome here storage closet, like my fancy Etsy shop operation. But it really was this place of just like, come as you are. You're welcome here. Come hang out. And I really feel like that's kind of like what I've experienced Jesus do in my life. Like it wasn't like, hey, figure yourself out and then open the door. It was like, hey, I'm opening the door. Are you going to come in? Yes. And I think that was just a powerful thing. I'm like, that's not necessarily saying, like, I'm not quoting a Bible verse, but I'm reflecting the heart of what I believe God says to us, to people who think like me and those who may not even know. And so anyways, that kind of just became a little bit of a tagline of my brand in such a way that it could speak to both the Christian part of my audience and the non-Christian part of my audience, and really help them maybe see a little piece of the heart of God just through what we're doing. And so for a long time, that was kind of the main tagline of the Etsy store and the blog that kind of evolved from that, kind of a sub brand of my overall brand. But that was kind of a movement. We put it on sweatshirts and it exploded. I mean, people were sharing, literally, like, we had Christian women sharing the gospel with guys at the grocery store who asked what it meant, and they told them, and everybody had a little bit different things. Some people were like, it's just given me permission to give myself grace. Like, I wear it for myself. It's this big cozy sweatshirt, and it reminds me that, like, I don't have to be perfect. And then we had women who were like, we believe this is the gospel, or whatever. And so it was really neat to hear how many stories of people who would share this sweatshirt, and the guy at the grocery store or whatever would be like, I'm an alcoholic and no one's ever said that to me. Like, that's the message I needed. And I was like, oh my gosh, so just hearing how powerful that was, and how so many women started to come into the movement because they were like, I just went through a divorce and I saw this sweatshirt on somebody, and now I had to have one. So it was just a neat thing where some people owned it for themselves, and some people shared it, and some people shared it from a Christian perspective. Some people just needed it to feel loved. It was really cool. It's been really cool. So anyways, that's kind of the first little movement. And now I'm such a little nerd about movement making. I'm like, cool. So now when I title a book, that needs to also be a title that can be a way of life and a movement rather than just the title. Like, that's how my brain thinks now.
Oh my goodness. I love you. Okay. So that's so fun. I love, while you were talking about your dad teaching you the 10-foot rule, that is phenomenal. But it also, just describing your upbringing, that was my home. We always had people over after church, and we did huge corn boils. And I grew up, like I said, outside of Pittsburgh, but we had a ton of land, and very special in my childhood was having these huge corn boils, these huge parties where people would come together in community. It was that same sentiment of just celebrating life and loving one another. Wow. I was literally over here grinning ear to ear going, we are like the same person. Okay. But I do love it. And then even my first book is called Broken into Beautiful. And it's not just a book. It's also a song that I wrote in. And so there's just such a kindredship. I love that. And I think that it's what we all need, is that Jesus said it so clearly. And he was actually talking to a motley crew of people with all kinds of struggles and strains, just like we have. And he said, come to me, those who are weary and heavy burdened, I'll give you rest. And it's like, your brokenness is welcome here. It's like,
yeah, that's basically
we need each other.
That's like another translation. I feel like that your brokenness is welcome here is like the Message translation of all the red words.
Yeah, it totally is. It totally is. So in your book, Own Your Everyday, I love how the main heart of it is to discuss the roadblocks to kind of living your God-given purpose. And you talk about different roadblocks like distraction, and which is a huge one for me, rejection, comparison, fear and anxiety, perfectionism, insecurity, expectations, and shame. I mean, that is a list. I know that my listeners are going, wait a minute, I didn't catch it all, but I know it all. It's all up in my business every single day. So I love in chapter 3, you talk about breakthrough begins with you, and you talk so straight to the listeners. And I know that my Graceologie community would resonate with, you did this 30-day challenge to stop picking yourself apart in front of other women. And then you say, actually, anybody. So what spurred you on towards that? Like, what experience do you have with picking yourself apart in front of other people? Because I thought that was so profound. We do that. We do that as women all the time.
Oh, yeah. Well, I think part of that maybe started to become very evident to me that women did that when I was in a sorority, because we would take photos as a group, or, even now in all the different things I do, like now I go speak to women everywhere. And then here's what I notice. It's so annoying. And I do it too, but I've had to be like, so many of the girls or the women who come to do meet and greet when I speak at a conference or at an event, they're like, do you have a good side? Do you have a good side? And I'm like, no. I actually part my hair in the middle now because I'm sick of having to feel like it's making you uncomfortable that I have to have a good side. So
that is a good strategy.
Either that, or we'll do like this group photo, and then they're like, can we get another one? Because like my arm looks weird.
Yeah.
And I'm like, well, you're a human, but yes, and I noticed that happened a lot when I was in a sorority, but it also happens a ton now, whether the woman is 13 or 30 or somewhere in between. And it's like, okay, what is this? And so, then I realized I kind of went through this really weird adult battle with cystic acne. Like, it just flared up. I think it's been a hormonal thing.
Yeah.
But anyways, I didn't have acne as a kid or as a, very minimal as a teenager. It was every now and then. And then all of a sudden at, 2 years into marriage, all of a sudden I started getting these massive flare-ups, and I'm like, what is going on? I started to pick my face a lot. Yeah. And then I started scarring my face. And because, you try to pick at something that's really deep, a cystic breakout is not just like a little surface level pimple. It's literally like it's like, I call them the underground kind of infections, basically. But yet they would be painful. And so I try to, break them, which would only cause my face to bruise and bleed and do all the things that aren't cute. And so I was realizing the damage I was causing by picking my face apart, literally, like quite physically. And I'm like, well, isn't that basically what we do when we pick ourselves apart, verbally? We verbally abuse ourselves, and we cause ourselves to bleed and bruise without even realizing it. So the whole concept of that chapter, and, in my own experience, I was like, I've watched women do this. They may not be picking apart their acne or their face or whatever, but they're probably picking apart their stretch marks or their cellulite or their scars or their personality. Like, they might say something that doesn't make people laugh, but thought that it would. And now then they're sitting there and they're like, well, you're just not funny. Why do you try? You talk to yourself like that. And I'm like, that's productive. So I kind of got to this point where I was like, I wouldn't, if my friend had breakouts on her face, I probably wouldn't reach across the table and start picking them apart. Like, that'd be weird, right?
That'd be very weird.
Or if my friend, her arm looks funny in a photo or looks like, or maybe she's put on some weight or whatever the thing is, I probably wouldn't say like, hey, can we take that again? Because Sarah's arm looks weird, right? That would be really rude. And so I'm like, it's interesting to me how we wouldn't do that to our friends, but we're willing to do it to ourselves. And so the whole takeaway from that chapter was like, the 30-day challenge was like, look, if you wouldn't say it to your friend, don't say it to yourself. If you wouldn't do it to a friend, don't do it to yourself. For 30 days, you have to start, because I think it takes like 21 to 30 days to break a habit. And I think we do these things so habitually and so subconsciously that we don't even realize the damage we're causing. And so it was a kind of like hey, let's get a clean slate here and have someone hold you accountable. And for 30 days, do something so different and start looking at and talking to yourself like you would if it was a friend. And you probably will experience a lot of healing as a result.
Yes, I loved that because it's one of those things where even just the awareness of it helps us move forward because the awareness becomes the accountability.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
I love that you challenge the readers in that way. And I think it's a really healthy thing for all of us to move forward with that. Just that standard. If you wouldn't say it to your friend, don't say it to yourself. Mm-hmm. It's like, girl, let me smack you upside the head. Well, I love, there's kind of that extension of your tagline because that's thematic. I can see that that's just really the posture of your heart and all you do, your brokenness is welcome here. In your book, page 19, I want to just read this paragraph. It says purpose. You're talking about purpose. Mm-hmm. You said there's profound purpose in simply meeting other people right where they are, in stepping into, not away from their struggles and sharing them. Sometimes we can be so quick to offer consoling words or dry someone else's tears when really the best thing we can do is let the tears flow and even absorb them. Bearing burdens doesn't mean fixing them. It means not allowing the other person to bear the load alone. Mm-hmm. And I was like, hallelujah. That is such a beautiful picture of the life that we're called to lead according to Jesus. And here you're doing it on social media. I see you. I've been watching you. And I see that you're using your social media platform. You're using this book. You're using your website, your business, your entrepreneurial spirit as an opportunity for influence. And that is the purpose that I see shining through. Mm-hmm. When did you realize that the true key to this intersection of faith and commerce, if you will, was really an opportunity to influence others and to focus on what really matters?
Yeah. Well, I think, I always would look at things like, Jesus spoke in parables, right? Like he often gave us these tangible examples that kind of married the spiritual and the practical, if that makes sense.
Totally.
And I think we try to create this sacred secular divide, but I don't always know if that's the right approach. I mean, I think it depends on what God's called us to. But in my life, I'm like, I realized I didn't start doing anything. I think what was interesting is I actually had opportunities to tell my story and witness to friends and really love them and kind of live the mission through running a shop, through starting in the commerce space. I didn't start like getting up in my sorority chapter meeting and preaching to my sisters, or I didn't get started speaking in a church. I didn't get started speaking in these places where everyone's kind of on the same page per se. I actually started speaking to sorority girls on college campuses. Those were my first speaking events for the most part, and so I kind of started like evaluating my beginnings and be like, and being honest with like, I don't think that was an accident. I think the fact that I had this tangible activity that people could get involved in and help with, and I could create somewhat opportunities for conversation and all of that, it wasn't an accident. And it's really informed the way I do things now, and seeing how cool and how interestingly business and, commerce and building relationships in that way. I mean, I think business is built on relationships. You can have the cutest marketing plan and the most money and the coolest product and kind of miss the point, in so many ways, because I think a truly successful business is built on trust and integrity and character and relationship and honesty. And it's like, those are biblical things. Yeah. And so I kind of look at it like they're not in separate camps, but I think we often try to put them in because I don't know if it's because we have really messed up views about money, or if it's because we feel uncomfortable or unqualified, or if we think like Jesus is over here and like commerce is over here. And I'm like, no, like I get so frustrated when girls ask me, they're like, well, should I go into ministry or should I pursue my passion of like being a lawyer? And I'm like, sister, like we need Christian lawyers. Like we need people in every industry. Why are you overthinking this? So I kind of just look at it like there really isn't a divide. I think we've created a divide, but I believe God's in everything. And I believe he, gives us principles in the Bible and just by knowing him of how to be a business owner of integrity and of honesty and of sound mind, right? And to be successful and to own those successful things and to make an impact with them, to do good things with it and to create opportunities for people and welcome them in and love them, but also give them the hard skills that they need too, or teach them those things. Like, I think we forget sometimes that ministry isn't just like hugging everybody. Sometimes it's giving people a kick in the pants and saying, hey, no, you messed up that order and here's how to do it right. And here's how to, be more disciplined. And you're actually helping them by doing that.
Yeah. We need to apologize to that client. We messed up. We need to make that right. Yeah. Exactly. Do the hard things.
Exactly. So anyways, I could go on about this a lot, but I just really believe there really is a space where they can both exist in a way. And I also believe that's what I believe about the personal development space too. I mean, I'm like, I don't think that has to be like that's in this camp and this is a Christian book or this, I really believe that we get to go into these spaces with authority and with confidence and with power and not be afraid of them and not think we don't belong in them because they don't have this label or that label. So anyways, I love blending things. That's why I say like, I feel like I'm kind of a unicorn because I kind of go in all these different spaces, but I think that's kind of like, I think sometimes the power of bringing Jesus with you wherever you go, whether it's a boardroom or a church.
Absolutely. So. I agree 100%. So one of the things that you really focus on in the message of this book is really overcoming those pressures to prove and kind of our striving. And you talk about perfectionism. And as you talk about that, like my 18-year-old daughter, that's one of her things. And I just wonder, I have to ask, what is your Enneagram number?
I am a 3 through and through.
I knew it. I totally knew you were a 3. I just wanted to confirm it because it's not. I didn't see it in your book, and I'm like, I know she's a 3 because that was my daughter. So I was laughing at that.
That's so funny.
Which is why, I think one of the struggles, because for those of you who are not familiar with the Enneagram, 3s are they're achievers and they are really into perfectionism, and it can mess with their own mojo in terms of confidence and insecurity. And well, if I don't make an accomplishment, people aren't going to love me. And so you talk about the difference between purpose and perfectionism. So can you tell us a little bit about that? Because I know some of the listeners just perked up a bit going, oh my goodness, that's me.
Yeah. So basically how I describe it is perfectionism, I think, is very much driven from a place of pressure to prove something. So, but doing something like, okay, the way I describe it is if I'm going to work on a project, if I have a purpose or like a why statement driving it that's deeper than just I've impressed my audience or I've impressed my in-law or whatever, whoever it is that we might be trying to impress or hoping to impress in our lives. I think when we actually have a deeper why, like I am doing this because I want to see transformation in women's lives, or I am doing this because I need to feed my family and we need to bring in an extra $1,000 a month. Like that's a noble reason to do something, you know, like let's be real. So whatever the deeper why is that ultimately is going to move the needle and make an impact, whether it's on your family or, people's lives or getting yourself healthier so that you can be more present for your family or whatever the goal is. I think when we pursue an activity or a project or a thing from that perspective, we're able to keep ourselves in check when we begin to start worrying about how it looks or how it's perceived or what other people think or if it's not perfect. But if we're doing it from a place of like pressure to prove, that's what creates this need for perfectionism because it's never going to be good enough, right? Like we're trying to prove something rather than just serve a deeper purpose or a deeper why. We really can get caught up in that. So that's kind of why I say like when you're trying to decide like, there are seasons of hustle. There are seasons where you have to just like go for it and give it everything and try to give and to do excellent work. Like there's a difference between operating perfectionism and just striving for excellence. So I think when you are trying to figure out like, okay, now I'm feeling a little overwhelmed by this. Am I operating in perfectionism or am I just trying to do this, intentionally? I always say, do you have a deeper why guiding what you're doing? And I actually apply that to social media. I apply that to working out. I apply that to all these things that I do, not only just in my work, because otherwise I can become a perfectionist about, well, have I reached every goal this week from a fitness standpoint? Or, you can become a perfectionist about how your feed looks or whatever these things that we get wrapped up in our lives. If we have a deeper why, like I use social media to market, educate, and impact. Are those three things that I'm doing, or do I use social media to create a cuter feed than so-and-so, right? Like, or to create the perfect aesthetic. And so there's some wisdom in having something that is visually appealing, but to what degree? So that's why I think for me, having these why statements help me actually continue keeping myself in check and having like a landing pad or like a home base to come back to when I begin to start like, oh my gosh, pressure to prove, oh my gosh, it has to be perfect. And what are they going to think? And, overthinking to the nth degree, I can go, wait a second, what's my deeper why here? And is that what I'm serving? And if it's not, then I'm operating out of the pressure to prove, therefore perfectionism, rather than from a place of purpose.
Yes. Wow. Why do we do that?
I don't know. That's a great question. I think it's because honestly, I could be wrong, but I've heard it described like, I think we all ultimately desire perfection because that's what we're made for. Like we desire God, right? Like, but I think we start to try to find it in like our performance or whatever. And I think there is an element of like, you want to perfect a skill to the best degree that you can. And there's an element of like, I think there's this drive for excellence in us for a reason. And I always am really careful when talking about this stuff because I think what can start to happen is we can almost like dump on the grace to the point where it's like, okay, just like be careless. It doesn't matter. Like you don't have to be perfect. God's got you. And it's like, all right, that I think can create a kind of a lazy mentality. And I'm just not about that. So it's like, what's that? That's why purpose is that like grounding center ground where it's not carelessness. It's not like, okay, I'm just going to embrace my mess and never care and just, whatever. I think that actually can be very unhealthy too. And I don't think that's the life we're called to. I think we also are called to excellence and intention. And so that's why I say purpose, not carelessness or, purposeness or purpose over pressure proof. So yeah, I don't really know why, but I think that could possibly be part of the reason.
Yeah. Our family scripture verse that we really always really reinforce with the kids is Proverbs 14:23, which says all hard work brings a profit, but mere talk leads only to poverty. So there is that. It's the truth of the way the world goes is that our efforts do matter, but they shouldn't define us. And I know that when we are striving and we're, just being intent, there's just such a fine line between passionate pursuit of excellence and then the striving, because I think the striving looks to others while the excellence is about being honorable with what we've been entrusted with. And I know that for myself and for all of my listeners, I think for every one of us who are breathing, that there is that fine line between perfectionism or purpose and then being comfortable with who we are versus who other people are. And jealousy gets involved and comparison. And I know that you talk in your everyday about that toxic layers of life where comparison gets involved. And I know that in social media that can become a big thing too. So what are some of the ways that you come alongside of women and say, okay, let's talk about comparison and jealousy and how toxic it is, and let's make a better choice?
Okay, so I'm going to give you a really simple answer because I think we can all agree that like comparison is bad, comparison is toxic, comparison is the thief of joy, all the little Pinterest quotes we all see everywhere. So we all know that, right? Yep. And I also think we often only talk about one type of comparison, which is, comparing my success to her success or my looks to her looks, basically my good things to her good things. And then therefore my good things don't seem so good, right? That's pretty much the comparison we're used to. But I think there's two other types of comparison that we don't really talk about. So I first always try to create an awareness of this because these are a little bit more subtle. The first is that we compare our issues. Like we compare, let's say, your friend went through a tragedy and you just are struggling with perfectionism or something else right now that maybe doesn't seem so bad in air quotes, right? So we suddenly start to discredit maybe something that could be very paralyzing to us or someone else because, like, for example, oh my gosh, like she couldn't possibly understand this little struggle I'm going through because now she's gone through tragedy, and that just discredits like what I've experienced or what I'm struggling with. Or on the flip side, maybe a friend starts opening up about something that they went through. This guy really frustrated them or whatever. And you're like, my husband cheated on me. You've got it easy, or whatever. And we do this. We compare our issues as if there's like a tier system as to who has it worse. And so that's one of the, and then the other way is that we compare our lives to our expected version of our lives. Like I thought by now I'd be married with 2 kids and I'm not. So we actually create a lot of comparison, even just within ourselves. Yeah. So I always try to highlight, like, be aware of these other types of comparison that we don't really talk about on the internet so much that really do exist. And then with that, my best piece of advice too, when it comes to comparison, is ask more than you assume and communicate more than you compare. So going with the example that we all are very familiar with, I guess this could work, in that regard. Like, I think we assume a lot when we start to compare. Like we assume this is where we should be for whatever reason, or we assume this is what others expect because we expected it for ourselves, or we assume somebody won't understand our simple struggle because theirs is so much harder, or we assume that someone's just 10 times better off in life than we are because they have great hair, or whatever the thing is.
Yes.
And it's like, we are doing so much assuming. What if we just asked? Like, I remember the big piece of like aha moment for me was when I was at the gym and I was comparing myself to this woman. She was probably in her mid-30s and she was doing these insane HIIT workouts. I'm like, are you a Navy SEAL? Like, do you have meetings with the president? It is 6 a.m. What are you doing? Like, I assumed she made, $1 million a year. She had a private jet. She, has meetings with the president. She's just crushing it at life out here in like my little farm town in Indiana. And I'm like, why do you live here? Like, go to LA, And so I had this whole story I had assumed and made up in my mind because she was doing harder workouts than me every morning. And at one point, a couple weeks into this silly process or this like idea that I had about her, I crossed paths with her in the section where you pick up a mat. And she was in the middle of her workout and I made eye contact and I was like, shoot, now I have to talk to this girl because the 10-foot rule is like a thing. And so I said, hey, are you doing a HIIT workout? And she said, yeah, you want to do it with me sometime? And I was like, whoa, no. Like, I do not want to do that.
That is above my pay grade.
Yeah. But I'm like, I'm a 3 and I'm an achiever. And so I'm like, I'm not about to say no and then see this girl in here every single week and look like a weenie. Absolutely not. So I said yes, met her like the next day or 2 days later for this HIIT workout. Didn't even know her name yet at that point. She just said, meet me here on Wednesday at 5:30 a.m. Okay. So I get there and, I'm thinking this chick is going to run me into the ground. She's going to, beat me. She's so much better at this. We ended up doing this workout. She's like, hey, we can take it easy, whatever. Like, she was so relaxed and so nice. And we ended up having this incredible conversation. Turns out she loves Jesus. She had this dream for the type of gym she wants to open one day. Starts telling me that. She And like, you know how I'm like, oh my gosh, how do you have so much energy every morning? She just goes to bed early because she has 2 young kids and she wakes up earlier than her husband. Like, go figure, right?
Yeah,
but
novel
I have this
idea.
massive, like, yeah, I have this huge story I've created in my mind. So anyways, the reason that basically taught me, like, wow, simply asking a question like, hey, what are you doing? And then getting to know someone. Like, I think the people that we compare ourselves to most or envy the most are usually the people we might like the most or learn something from if we just sat down and got to know them. So I always say, ask more than you assume and communicate more than you compare.
Ask more than you assume and communicate more than you compare. I love it. That's so perfect. So all of that will help every single one of us own our everyday, which is your new your new book title, and it's a bestseller. And just congratulations on that. That's exciting. But
Thank
it
you.
is just such a valuable and needed message. It's a valuable conversation for us to have. But purpose, I think, seems like a unicorn of sorts, unattainable, unfindable. And yet you're right. It's about doing the little things, taking practical steps and being intentional. So I'm super proud of the messaging God has for you. Is there any last thoughts that you'd like to share with my community just on, what can we do today just to move towards that purpose that God has for us, or just the uniqueness that he has designed us to do?
I think the best thing I can say is to really own your ideas and your expertise. Because I think we women can sometimes be either afraid of our own ideas or discount them because they seem silly, like they're too small, or the dream we have is too big or too small or too silly or too out there, or whatever this lie we tell ourselves is. So I always say, like, own everything that comes into your mind and just write it down so that you can actually process it, that you could talk through it with somebody. Because I think we can be so quick to discount the things that maybe we're really that are being put on us for a reason, that are being, that are coming up for a reason. That doesn't mean you have to jump like into them full blown. I think we put a lot of pressure on ourselves. Like, no, God, like, what do you want? And we kind of want to figure out the whole will. And it's like, good luck figuring out the will of God in all areas, like you are not Holy Spirit. But, I think we need to take that pressure off ourselves and like remember that God is like sometimes just giving us opportunities and chances and reminding us like, hey, what do you want to do? You don't have to worry about me working. Like, you include me, I'm going to work. You don't have to worry about that. Your job is to figure out what you want to do and to do it, and to just be open to what I'm teaching you or what I'm asking you to step into in the midst of those things. So take the pressure off, I think, is the best thing I can say when it comes to figuring out your next thing or your next step, and just try some stuff. It's really not that complicated. I think we just complicate it so much because we can really begin to overthink or feel like we have to prove something to either God or ourselves or other people. And so my whole thing is like, you're never going to show up for what you're made to do unless you stop living under the pressure to prove. So take that off and just own your ideas and try some stuff.
Yes. That's so good. It's so true. So I know that there's women who are listening who are just all of a sudden taking a breath going, oh my goodness. Okay. I can do this because, God designed me unique. He's given me gifts and I need to trust that. So I'm so grateful that you have shared a part of your day with us today and your heart and your message. And I love all of the things that God has you doing. I love the way he wired you. And I think you shine beautiful. You sparkle. You do.
Oh, well, thank you.
So would you just mind ending us by just praying over the Graceologie listeners and just, really circling the wagons with some of the things that are just really burdened on your heart right now?
Absolutely. Lord, thank you so much for this podcast, for this community, for the women that listen. And I just pray that you give them such a feeling of freedom as they tune out of this episode. I don't know if that's the right word, tune out of the episode, and just give them this newfound perspective and view of their lives, and maybe even of you and of the things that you're calling them to, that you aren't a God that puts pressure on us to figure it out. You actually just give us opportunities to step into and prepare us in the midst of those, even the things that seem random. So I just really just pray that you would make that so evident in their lives, that you give them so much freedom to choose and to try and to live from a place of just intention and purpose, keeping you in mind. And you don't put a pressure to prove. You don't put an expectation on us like we often assume. You really are just a good dad who gives his kids gifts and opportunities and things. And I pray we just own that we take that and really apply that in our everyday lives, in our ordinary lives, before we ever see some extraordinary result. Lord, you've promised us a reward. So I just pray that we continue to walk with faithfulness and intentionality and really in freedom from the pressure to prove so that we can really show up for what we were made to do. Amen.
Amen. The book is Own Your Everyday. My guest has been Jordan Lee Dooley. Jordan, thank you so much for joining me today on the Graceologie podcast.
Oh, absolutely. Thanks for having me.
Isn't she just the coolest? I love her heart. Be sure to visit Jordan online and connect with her on social media, especially Instagram. Today's show was edited by Chad Shuping, and the music is by PremiumBeat.com. If you'd like to invite me to speak at your next women's event, or if you have questions, comments, or topic suggestions, I love hearing from you. Send me a message right from my website, which is gwensmith.net. All of the links and the show notes from today's episode with Jordan can be found at gwensmith.net/Graceologie. That's gwensmith.net/Graceologie. Thanks so much for joining me today. I'll be back soon with another episode, but until then, if you haven't already subscribed, please hit your podcast app and subscribe to the Graceologie with Gwen Smith podcast. Subscriptions and reviews on iTunes or whatever your podcast app is, they help you not miss anything, and they really make a difference to those of us who are working hard to bring you these shows. And be sure to connect with me on social media as well. I'm at Gwen Smith Music on every platform. And the show is at Graceologie with an IE on every platform. Now get out there and have a beautiful, grace-filled day.